Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for our first Power to Perform session for parents. The purpose of tonight really is to give you an overview of how you can become engaged with the school to support your child's learning during the course of this year. And as we know, this is a very different year from any other year the students and parents and teachers have faced before. But I really wanted to start with some of we've been through quite a lot of, the exam results and all of the publicity of exam results that was in the press. But actually, out of some extraordinary times have come some extraordinary outcomes for some of our students. And I wanted to just share that with you, because I think it's really important. Despite all of the barriers that were put in place and all the change that happened, we still had a really successful year for both our GCSE and A-level students, and we had some brilliant successes both individually across subjects and by department as well. And I think that is really important in this context. And one of the messages really that we wanted to get across tonight is about the importance of that continuous work. This time last year, if we had sat and talked to students about the fact that potentially they would not be sitting exams, that potentially they would be reliant upon the centre assessed grades, I don't think anybody could have believed the situation that we would have been in. So I think that's one of our really key messages tonight, is the importance of working all throughout the year, because those students who didn't do that last year did end up being disadvantaged, because there are some students who think, well, I'm just going to leave it until the end, I'm just going to give it for the last 6 to 8 weeks. And of course what staff didn't then have was that really good historical data of students' performance in mocks and in tests that we could rely on. So that is a really key message that we would like to get across tonight, about the importance of not saving it all up to the end, but the importance of doing lots of small bits of work and revision throughout the course of the year. I think it's absolutely fair to say that not one of us has been untouched by what has happened in the last 6 months. There are things we are now doing which we would never have envisaged, terms like social distancing, for us in school, all the things that we have had to implement as a result of some of these changes and the impact of the pandemic. We just can't underestimate that. And what it's done is massively change education and the way in which students are learning, and the way actually in which we have to respond. Almost overnight, what we had to do was to change the way in which students were taught. So one day they were in the classroom, the next day they were all at home, and we were having to put in place online and remote learning. And there are challenges that came with that. But over the course of time, what we've done is really try and benefit from that. And I just wanted to share with you some of the things the students liked about learning in lockdown. And we know there were lots of things that they didn't like. We know there were lots of things that none of us liked, but there were lots of things the students really did like about learning in lockdown. And lots of people have carried out lots of various studies. And one of the ones in particular that we looked at was, a study that had been carried out. There were 2 methods. First, looking at student questionnaires, which were delivered to all students, and then secondly, through students writing a short paragraph about a typical school day during lockdown. And what we have learned from this is that actually students really quite like that opportunity to be able to have what we call blended learning. So doing work at home, which is online, and then having that interaction with staff to get the feedback, to ask the questions, to be able to get their work assessed. But there were lots of things that they really did benefit from that. The things, of course, that they missed most about school was that face-to-face interaction with other students and teachers. And of course, we can't underestimate the value of being with their friends at break times and lunch times and for extracurricular. So what we have done this year is to look at what can we take from those lessons that have learned, what do we need to do for students for this coming year, and how can we best put that in place. So staff have been working really hard to look at where there are gaps to fill, where students need the most support, and we'll be using different methods to help that. So for example, what you might see with regards to work being set at home is a lot more preparation of things we know the students can do themselves at home, and we will be asking them to do that and then come in so that the staff can really focus on the things that they know the students need that teacher input for, as a way of being able to bridge some of those gaps that we know students will have from having missed that time being in school. Your engagement for us is absolutely paramount, really, to everything that we do, and not just because that's what we want, but because research also shows that the more parents are engaged in the education of their children, the more likely children are to succeed. And your input in that is really key for us, and there are a number of ways that we can do that. Having your support, working with us, is going to result in better outcomes for students, and never has there been a time where this will be more important. Making sure we've got that positive relationship where staff feel they can contact you if there's something that they need to discuss. You can contact staff, that we can have conversations with students and they can come home and discuss those with you. That all really helps. And for us as well, the more information we know, the better we can help to understand family dynamics. And again, never has that been more important than at this point in time. We know that every student will have had a different experience during lockdown. They will have had to have dealt with many different things. Some of our students have had some brilliantly positive experiences, but there are some students who've been on the opposite end of that. So the more information we have, the more we can help to support that. I think also the other thing about your engagement is that the more you look, the more you talk, the more you talk about work with your sons or daughters, it will help you to better understand what the teacher expectations are, and also to know what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. So what really that looks like then for you is just the learning at home, so helping with homework, and that doesn't mean to say that you're going to be able to help with every subject specific question, but I think there are generic things that you will be able to do just by asking questions. And sometimes, what homework have you got? What is it you need to do? Let me actually see what you've done, as opposed to them saying, well, I've done absolutely everything, and actually you doubt that because they've only spent the last 5 minutes doing it. Other skills and talents that you can talk about, and also that communication that I've previously mentioned is really important. In school activities, when we can run those, again, it's slightly limited at the moment, but anything you feel that you can help to contribute towards, that is really helpful for us. And of course, there are always opportunities for you to get as involved as you want to by joining our governing board. Just to update you on some of the changes that we've made this year. Previously, you will know that students all belonged to a house. They still all belong to houses, but we've decided for this year that we are going to streamline things, and we've got students back with year team leaders. Now, the brilliant thing for year 11 is their year team leader this year is Mrs. Rashley, and she was their head of year in year 7. So she's the person who has seen them at the start of their school and will see them throughout year 11 as well. So she already knows lots about those students, and she can already know what support needs to be put in. The form tutor is also vital. That is the person who your child sees every single day. They will have good relationships with them. They will know exactly what they need to do to support them. So those two people will play key roles. Mrs. McDonald-Brown has now worked with our year 11 for the last few years, so she is someone else who is there to offer pastoral support, and on a day-to-day basis, lots of our students go and they ask for help, they ask for support. She is somebody who is there as well. In addition to which, this year we've got Mrs. Hunt, who many of you will know is a PE and dance teacher, who's overseeing years 10 and 11. So we've got a whole team of people who are ready to support students in whatever mechanism that needs to be. So whether it's academic support, whether it's pastoral support, or support in any aspect of their school life. And of course, vitally, we've got their subject teachers and subject leaders as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, these people have been working really hard to look at what adjustments need to be made to the curriculum for us to be able to make sure the students haven't lost out from the time that they haven't been in school. Just a few tips really as well, because the coming years is never easy. We are predicting that exams will of course take place next year. But given the amount of change that has happened and how quickly that happens, then that's not something that at this point we can guarantee. The government has made a commitment that students will sit exams, and we very much hope that will be the case. But just a few tips for you to help with the next year. I think one of the things that can happen, and particularly at this point in time, is the students sometimes feel, well, they've got so much to do, they don't know how they're going to do it. And the first thing we would advise for students is they just need to stay calm, and for you to be able to help them to do that. So we've got some specific support packages, and Mr. Gartside, who's our Vice Principal with Oversight for Curriculum, will talk a little bit more about that later on. But with regards to how you can help, I think kind of being a role model, and as I said earlier on, just asking those questions, being interested in what your child is doing is really helpful. Contacting us if you need some additional support, or if you know that there are questions that you don't know the answers to. And also setting some goals for students as well. So knowing what it is they're expected to achieve, knowing where they are in that place will be really helpful. I think, again, keeping active, and that is what, you know, that is really what we want students to do, that balance between completing their work but actually taking some time out to do some exercise and to do some work that you know, actually keeps their minds and their brains active, and having some downtime is essential. And having a kind of program in place where students build in, and we will do some work with them on that, so that, you know, you should never see a revision timetable or a work timetable which only has work in it. Building in breaks, building in rewards, building in treats is a really important part of that, so the students can see that yes, there's a goal with regards to their academic performance, but also there's a goal with regards to, you know, what they can get as a short-term reward. Eating healthily and making sure they have breakfast before they come to school, but also the food that they're eating is something which is going to give them energy. And whilst we all like the odd treat, if we could try and make sure that what they're eating is healthy, that is also really helpful for us. I've already talked about making sure that there is time out. As much as students, we want students to be working and to be focusing on what they're doing, we also know the benefit of making sure that there is time where they are relaxing and where they're doing things that they really enjoy doing. We would obviously advise that students do get enough sleep, and they're getting sleep at the right times as well. And if you could please encourage them to, you know, unplug, to make sure that when they go to bed that they've turned their devices off at least 30 to 45 minutes before they go to sleep. We know that from research that tells us the students actually are better prepared for their learning when they do that. And there are going to be times this year that, you know, both you as a parent and students are not going to be calm about things, because there is a lot. There's been a lot of change, and also there will be lots of pressure points throughout the course of the year. And being able to stay calm and to be able to rationalise, well, what do we need to do? How can we make things better? That will help. And also getting familiar with GCSE language. And again, that comes back to the point about asking questions, taking an interest, and trying to understand some of the subjects that they are doing. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Gartside now, and he's going to talk about what we are going to specifically do this year to help to support your child.
So we talk regularly to Year 11 about this being a race, and they're actually in competition with about 500,000 other Year 11 students across England. And we show them this idea that you know, we're partway down the road, but we have a couple of terms left. And when we meet with them in assemblies, this is the message they regularly get. You're not just in competition with the people next to you, but across the country, everybody is aiming for those top grades. And so we show students this video, which explains how that works and why it's so important that they work hard and increasingly hard over the next months, over this next year. I showed this to year 11 students last week, actually. So this is the last 3 years worth of actual exam results, so 17, 18, 19. And you'll see that each year they only ever give about the same percentage at each level. So grade 9, about 3.5% in English literature, about 2.5 to 3% in English language. Now, each year students work harder and teachers get better at teaching the exams, so everybody has to do that bit more in order to get those grades, because they want to only allow certain numbers of students to get those grades. It's called comparable outcomes, and we need to understand that in terms of our work ethic. Mrs. Aitchison touched upon the fact that many of our students have been at home and they've been working from home for so long, and so what I want to share with you now is what we're doing here to bridge any gaps. Well, the first thing is keeping it really, really positive. So the language that teachers use is about supportive. It's about how we can build back, develop resilience, and keeping things in perspective. We're looking at finding out what students do and don't know. So rather than them coming back in year 11 having lots and lots of big tests with lots of pressure, they'll be finding they're doing lots of quizzes, lots of low stakes testing. We want students to be resilient, we want them to bounce back, and we want them to feel comfortable and confident again in their learning and being at school. I'm going to share with you in a moment a couple of the different approaches that teachers are using in lessons, and also the positive ways in which home learning has benefited what we now do in school and the way forward. One of the things we've said to staff is they need to use the Goldilocks principle. So this idea that the work being set is not too difficult, it's not too easy, but it's just right, whilst at the same time maintaining very high expectations. We want every student to get the best possible grades at the end of the year. We're also thinking about and implementing different ways we can keep in touch with the work done in year 10 by interleaving the topics. So rather than teaching things one at a time, as you can see in the top diagram, we are putting things in every now and again. So they're revisiting the same messages and they're hearing things more regularly, and they're being reminded of things that they've done previously. So it keeps it fresh in the mind, and research suggests that this is a much better way of learning and really pays dividends when it gets to exam time. Teachers too are trying to grab back efficiencies, time efficiencies through the time that's been lost through giving whole class feedback, and research suggests that this is a really, really useful thing to do. It sometimes will replace individual comments, and it also allows rapid, effective feedback for students. This photograph was taken in 1850, and it's a classroom, I understand, in Derbyshire, and the children and staff there today would not find themselves out of place in classrooms today as it was then. The teaching model hasn't changed a great deal. In fact, I think the lady at the back actually taught to me, but we've got there the new developments in terms of working from home, working on Microsoft Teams, and hopefully you'll have seen your child using these things along with Show My Homework, or Satchel as it's now called. We are really making great inroads with the Microsoft Teams software, and students can use it to hand work in. Teachers can upload lessons if students are not in school, and it's really been quite a fantastic thing for us. All students are being added to Microsoft Teams for each of their classes, and work can be set on there. It can also be set on there if a student, for example, has to self-isolate and is at home. We are also providing for parents some training in the next week. So Wednesday, 16th of September, our assistant principal for teaching and learning, Mrs. Mackenzie, will be doing a similar presentation to this, all about how Microsoft Teams works. So you know what to look out for. It's really short and can highly recommend you watch that. So what can our Year 11 students expect across the course of this year? You've seen lots and lots of reference to Pixel, and we use a lot of their resources. It stands for Partners in Excellence. About half the secondary schools in the countries are members of Pixel, and there really are some great resources, some of which are online, some of which teachers are using in class. They divide up their work into 3 areas. Currency, which is about the actual exam results and how we get to those. We've got character aspects of it, so about good habits, good behaviours, making sure that mental health is in the right place, and also about culture, so a focus on health and physical well-being. So when we bring these 3 things together, we produce and get really well-rounded students who are successful at the end of the year. Now, what I'd like to share with you now is what we call the rhythm of the year. It's how Year 11 will unfold and some of the key dates. It's actually been quite a challenge to put this together this year because there's quite a bit of uncertainty about what's happening, and I'll go into that detail in a moment. We'll also publish this online, so I appreciate that if you're watching on a small screen, some of the text might not be readable here. But normally we do exams for Year 11 in November and March. We're pushing those back this year into the last 2 weeks of the autumn term to make sure students have got as much time as possible to feel confident with their learning, with their subjects, so they can do as well as they possibly can. After Christmas, on the 21st of January, we have a parents' evening, and our plan is to give out the results of the exams at that evening. Just a small sort of side note, what used to be called mocks, we are now calling PPEs, pre-public examinations. We want students to think of them in a different way, and mocks, this idea that it's not real, don't always allow Year 11s to get their mind around how they should approach those. They need to be treated so carefully, especially as in many subjects, the results of these the mocks last year, these PPEs, were central in the school deciding their centre assessed grades because they couldn't sit the exams instead, so they are vital. We look each spring to get parents in. We have a parents workshop planned each year. All being well, we'd like to do that this coming year too. And at that point, we share with you some really specific strategies about subjects to help at home so you know what's going on the final straight. Now, the last 3 boxes there talk about our written public examinations, and there's lots of speculation at the moment about when they will be. They normally begin about the 10th of May and they last until the end of June, but there is speculation about them being in June and possibly July this year. Now, as soon as we find out, obviously we'll let you know. Just a few things about the language of learning at Year 11. There might be some terms that you're unfamiliar with. So Pixel, I think I've already explained. We asked students to attend quite a few WTMs, walking, talking mocks. We placed them in the exam rooms in the same sorts of seating as they would have in an exam, and they go through exam papers with a teacher in the same amount of time, and they're taught tips and tricks and things that they should look out for as they go through. Feedback on these has been incredible. Students find it a real benefit to their learning, and students should expect to attend walking, talking mocks this autumn and then again in the spring. And before the summer exams next year, assuming they take place as normal, we also run them generally the day before the real exam. So students are really familiar with how the paper looks, what it feels like, the timings. It is a really great strategy. We also share with you, and you'll see these at Parents' Evening, Smith Proformas. What these are is a breakdown of where the students need to improve in a particular subject. So in this example, it's French. And there are 3 sections to the Smith Proformas. We have diagnosis, which tells you which areas you need to work on, and they're individual, so each student has their own based upon their results in the exams. They have some therapy, so this is how they're going to get help. This is how they're going to develop knowledge in the areas in which they are not finding easy, and then they're retested. So diagnosis, therapy, and testing, because if we don't test how the therapy has gone, if we don't kind of come full circle, we won't know that what we're doing is successful in kind of filling gaps. So expect to see those over the course of the year. You should also expect to see these documents too. So these are called PLCs, Personalised Learning Checklists, and students fill them in and they tick green, amber or red to show which areas of the course they are really familiar with and really happy with and doing well in, and which areas they are finding a challenge. And this really helps focus revision, and it helps the staff decide which areas to focus on with students too. I just want to take this opportunity to remind you that if you don't already have the MyEd app, to please get that. It's great to see things about attendance, achievements, hopefully not, but the behaviour points are also listed on there, and this is also how you get school reports. So if you don't have it, please download it. Any problems, do contact the college. And in addition, it's also useful to keep an eye on what was called Show My Homework. It's the same software, but they've rebranded it. It's called Satchel One. And students can have this app and you can have a login too to see what they're up to. So that's particularly useful. Now, I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Wiles. Mrs. Wiles is the head of maths and a senior teacher. She's going to talk to you about bridging the gap in maths and what to expect from the maths curriculum, and she will then hand over to our Head of English, Ms. Sarins.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Wiles, the Head of Maths. Thank you, Mr. Gartside. So if you just have a look in front of you, there's some bullet points in regards to what we'll be looking at in maths. We've had quite a lot of time planning for this in expectation of schools reopening and coming back. So I'm just going to list some of the things that your students will be experiencing in lessons, and obviously please ask them about these things at home. So first of all, we use regular multi-topic skill checks. So at the moment, these are often seen as starters. We're using that to inform planning. So very regularly, but not every lesson, we would use multi-topic skills checks so that we can assess prior learning and act accordingly. We've set up on Microsoft Teams our classes, and we are uploading work to the files on there. There is a file for class resources that students can access. Obviously, we've got this in place for students who may be absent or in the current climate if they are self-isolating. We also update posts to explain what has happened in the lesson as appropriate. So look out for those, accessing those. Low stakes weekly testing has been something that's been talked about quite a lot. In maths, we use something called ED, which is basically GCSE topic quizzes and diagnostic questions, where the teacher will get quite a lot of feedback after these are completed. We've decided for year 11, the best thing that we can do at this stage, we don't want to give them lots of exams when they come back straight to school. We want them to feel confident and build up build up a picture, but doing that a little more subtly. So we are setting low stakes weekly testing on our homework as a homework. So students will be shown in the classroom, if they're not familiar with this, how to use and access. They'll be given a login code and everything. That is happening this week in lessons. These quizzes will be put onto Show My Homework, or access to them will be via, Satchel 1 it's now called, not Show My Homework. What are we using them for? Well, we've got a blended approach in maths. So we're looking at prior learning. We're using them to assess prior learning before we plan the units of work. So the things that we assume they know from year 10 and things that were taught over lockdown. So we're using them in that way. We are then also using them to assess new learning. So we are covering the curriculum in the maths lessons, and we're using them in different ways so that we have a blended approach. The teachers are looking at the analysis of these and using that most often as plenaries in lessons. If, for example, a significant number of students got a question wrong, we would obviously act on that and teach accordingly. The after-school interventions are running, but they're going to start this term with option subjects. So if you have a look there, look out for maths interventions, which will run from November 2020. We also use the personal learning checklist that Mr. Gartside has mentioned. So these should be at the front of students' books. That's currently happening at the moment, so gives a little bit of time. But if you have a look at your child's book in the next few weeks, you should see either a personal learning checklist or a stage document if they are in the top set. So that is the same sort of thing, but it's called a staged assessment criteria document. When we do mock exams formally, so the first ones are going to happen in December, we do analyse the papers and we update the PLCs with individual student strengths and weakness. The intervention that follows addresses these things. In terms of regular feedback, in maths we use a system called exit tickets. If you're wanting to look at those in books, they would be on a yellow piece of paper. So once we complete a unit, the students do a short assessment. I've done some today with my year 11 class. We have to mark very differently at the moment, so I can't give those back instantly, but after a few days, the students have left them behind and I will be marking them, and then we will be feeding back. So this is to assess, we've taught a unit, we're now going to assess it, but it's not a big exam. But all these things are preparing them for the mock exams and the final exam. They then get given individual feedback of how to improve, and again the teacher will plan accordingly based on their findings from these. So in terms of key actions that are specific in maths for year 11, it's been a hard time. It's been, I'm sure the students have had some anxiety about coming back to school and what's going to happen. We're here to keep the motivation up. So, and I want you please to do that at home as well. Just get them ready for a revision. So encouraging good study skills, checking that they're completing the homework that we're setting, ensuring that they've got a revision guide. Now, you don't have to purchase those through the school. Any revision guide for GCSE Maths to 9 to 1 at the correct tier would be suitable, because the content of GCSE Maths is the same for every exam board. So although we are examined with Educast, you don't need to buy an Educast revision guide. Any GCSE Maths 9 to 1 revision guide would be appropriate. Just ensure that your child is aware of the correct tier that they should be studying, but that they should be well aware from their teacher. Another thing that I know we've come back to school and the organisation, but a scientific calculator is essential for the higher level maths and for any foundation students. So please could you check that your child has a scientific calculator, and if not, get one ordered, please. There will come a time shortly when we will issue past papers, but obviously we're not quite at that point yet. And then you can have a look on the Educast website if you wish to, where past papers are available, but we do produce exam booklets, not in the new year. This is after the mock exams have taken place. I would also want to mention a couple of other places. I've mentioned ED Maths, which is what we're using to assess, but there is also the Pixel Maths app. Students have logins for this, and this is very good because it will mark it for them and they can focus on particular grades, particular topics, and it's also got PowerPoints and videos to support them. Another one is My Maths. Once again, that's a really useful website, and they can get assessment instantly if they are working through any of the My Maths tasks. And there's another good website, which is Corbett Maths, that has videos and exam questions that link and answers as well. So that's a pretty good website where you could look for further guidance. I'm going to hand over now to Mrs. Zarins, the head of English and a senior teacher in the school. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Miss Sarins, I'm the head of English. Right, the first thing I want to talk to you about is, again, bridging the gap. So what are we doing in English precisely, and what you can expect to see in the coming months? So I'll just press the first thing I'd like to tell you is classes, all your year 11 classes, the classes that your students are in, will be set up on Microsoft Teams. So if there's ever a situation where your student can't actually attend, all the work will be available online, so they'll be able to log and find that straight away. It's a very reassuring measure to know that that's there and that's in place. Secondly, much like the maths department, we have set up a series of low stakes weekly tests so that we can ascertain whereabouts students are in terms of their learning. So any potential gaps or anything we need to revisit, we can do that from year 10 and make sure that they have all the required knowledge that they need to be successful within their exams at the end of the year. I would really encourage you to make sure that your children are checking Show My Homework on a regular basis and making sure that those tests are being done, because it's a really good snapshot indication for us to look at where students are and what it is we need to do in order to intervene and make sure that they're getting the best possible preparation. This year going forward, we will be running after school interventions to support students that are potentially falling a little bit below, but we'll also be running them for, you know, those students that are aspiring for higher grades as well. Again, that won't be happening until after half term, so your children will need to keep an eye out for when that information comes out. Fourthly, we are doing connect activities at the start of every lesson. We are revisiting knowledge from year 10, and so to make sure it's going embedded into their long-term memories, to ensure that they have that for their exams at the end of the year. Another initiative that we're using is Writing Fridays, which has been very successful last year. So obviously writing is a key part of English, but we're finding that continually revisiting has caused us a boost in English language results. So that's a strategy that we think has worked particularly well, and it's something we are going to continue to do this year with our new year 11s. And finally, or sorry, penultimately, we're going to use personal learning checklists. So that's been touched upon previously. Just to identify after both sets of PPEs, or the mocks, what it is students need to be focusing on in particular, in order to make sure that they're fully ready and prepared in both language and literature, to make sure that they can achieve as highly as possible. Another thing that's really worth attending for students, and I would fully encourage your children to go to these, would be the English literature lectures. We ran those last year and they were particularly successful this year. It's likely, due to the current situation with coronavirus, that they will probably be run online, virtually, but they were really beneficial for a lot of students last year. And any encouragement, we will send out a message when they're being run, and any encouragement you can give to your children to attend those would be very gratefully received. Okay, some of the key actions for this year then, just for yourselves really, to make sure students and your children are engaging as far as they can. We just make sure and do a check that your child has all copies of the English literature set texts. They should have them from year 10. I have actually have a go at reading them yourselves. Not always, you know, I realise that not everyone's a reader, but I certainly feel that if you have a knowledge of those texts yourself, and you can talk to your children about Macbeth, you can talk to your children about A Christmas Carol, or indeed some of Any Inspector Calls and some of the poetry, then it's kind of enriching for them, and it kind of consolidates their knowledge. Secondly, please ensure that, as has been mentioned previously, that students are doing their homework English, particularly as a subject where their extended writing skills are particularly important, and any practice that's set needs to be completed at home. Using a stopwatch, encouraging students to use a stopwatch to check their time management is particularly important. We've looked at some of the data from previous years, and it's often those later questions on the exam paper that students struggle with or score slightly lower on. So timing themselves, we will obviously do work on this in school as well, but any extra additional time they can spend on this at home will improve their performance in exams. Please encourage your child to read quality fiction or non-fiction. I suppose I should be encouraging really reading online at this point, rather than you know, the tactile experience of having a newspaper. But any additional reading that can be encouraged will it's going to enrich their vocabulary and only make their performance in exams even better. Investigate different apps and websites. Some of the ones we recommend are Spark Notes, there's a Student Room, Mr. Bruff, who can grate a little bit in terms of his voice, but very beneficial, and a lot of students do like him. He's very clear in his explanations. The Pixel Lit apps, which we'll be launching during the year. We do a session called Revise Like a Pro, which I think I see at some point we'll be running soon. Give students you know, all the skills that they need to make sure that they're revising as well as they can. We also have resources available online at the school shop, but much like maths, there's plenty of revision resources online as well, which you can purchase. The final one, which I would usually say, would be to go and see a performance of a set text, but obviously there are COVID limitations at the moment. The curve isn't, you can't go there currently, but in the future, if that is a possibility, then look at going to do that with your children. Aside from anything else, it would be an enjoyable experience. Right, I'm going to hand you back to Mrs. Aitchison. Thank you.
Right, thank you everyone. I hope you found that useful as an insight into what Year 11 will bring. There's a recorded version of this and we will make that available on YouTube. There is also some information about science classes and the work the science are doing, which you'll be able to find there. We've also helpfully pulled together a summary sheet for you so that you can look at in general what you can do to help, specifically in English and specifically in maths. So if you have any follow-up questions, then please don't hesitate to contact anyone at the college, whether that's the form tutor, the year team leader, the subject teacher or heads of department, and we will be able to help you to respond to those questions. Can I just thank you all for your time this evening? It is really important that we share with you what we intend to do over the course of this year. And as I say, if you've got anything that you need, any questions, then please contact the college. Thank you very much for listening and have a good evening.